Hey guys, Dave again. Welcome back to the channel. So in this one, let's talk about the big Glock lawsuit that everybody's talking about, run through the piece of legislation that made it possible, and then talk about the case that people seem to be forgetting about that I think could really undermine this piece of legislation. Let's get into it. Okay, so on this channel, we like learning things and knowing stuff. So if we take and we look at this Glock case and we just look at it on the surface, it's a great win, fantastic, moving on, gloss over it. But there's some bigger issues going on here, and I think we're going to see this come back to get us later on. Not necessarily the Glock case, but the actual act that the Glock case was adjudicated on. So if we take and we look, let's run through the Glock case real quick. I'll try to be quick with it. I'm sure you guys have seen a bunch of other videos on it. So if we take and we look at this article from the Washington Examiner, it breaks down the Glock case, and I'll link all of this stuff down in the description so you guys can go read it. So basically in the Glock case, some kids were coming back from a church retreat. 14-year-old girl finds a 9mm in the back. She's in the back seat there, pulls it out. No mag in it, thinks that it's empty, doesn't bother to look at the chamber indicator, squeezes a round off right through the seat and drills this kid in the back and paralyzes him. The kid sued Glock, and basically the lawsuit said that there weren't enough warning indicators or safeties on the Glock to let the girl know that there was one in the chamber. The fact that there is, and that Glock has a ton of safeties on it, there was no manufacturing defect determined by the judge, would have been a major indicator needed in order for Glock to lose this case. So the fact that it's not a design flaw, it's built as intended, Glock wins the case. It basically got thrown out pretty quick based on the PLCAA. What is the PLCAA, you're asking? So the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, I'm just gonna call it the act. So basically, let me read you really what it's all about, and then we'll get into where it's kind of fallen short, and then we'll talk about the case that I think ultimately ends up at the Supreme Court and where this thing gets challenged. But let's get into it real quick. So it's a United States law that protects firearms manufacturers and dealers from being held liable when crimes have been committed with their products. However, both manufacturers and dealers can still be held liable for damages resulting from defective products, which we didn't see in the Glock case, so that's how Glock won that one, breach of contract, criminal misconduct, and other actions for which they are directly responsible in much the same manner as any U.S.-based manufacturer of consumer products is held responsible. Now here comes some key lines. They may also be held liable for negligent entrustment when they have reason to know a gun is intended to use in a crime. So that's key. So this law, or act, if you will, it became law in October of 2005. It was signed by George W. It actually enjoyed a ton of bipartisan support, passing the Senate 65-31 and passing in the House 283 to 144, back when Congress could actually get stuff done. But basically, what the legislators saw was states, cities, mayors, all these cats were trying to use litigation to end the gun industry because they couldn't get legislation passed. So in '98, the Chicago mayor sued a bunch of the gun manufacturers, saying that their guns were the problem for crime, not criminals. 2000, Smith & Wesson had to make some concessions to good old Bill Clinton there. Basically, that's where we got just a ton of safety features that went in. That's why your older Smith & Wessons are way better than your newer Smith & Wessons. And Andrew Cuomo, back when he was HUD secretary, came out and said that gun manufacturers should get ready to die by 1,000 cuts. And Elliot Spitzer's out there talking about gun manufacturers needing to have bankruptcy lawyers on staff because they're going to be knocking on your door. This got passed. It gave them, being gun manufacturers, a bunch of protection where you just can't be sued every time somebody goes out and kills somebody. It's just like car manufacturers. Like you don't go out and sue a car manufacturer because you drove into a tree. It wasn't the car's fault. All right. So there are some stipulations in there, where it protects gun dealers and it protects gun manufacturers. Now, gun dealers in particular have really, out of any of them, have dropped the ball. So there's been a couple, and we'll go through one where there was a Missouri gun shop. They had to pay $2.2 million because basically they sold a gun to a schizophrenic woman who went out and killed her father. Now, the gun shop owner didn't do themselves any favor. He basically told his staff, anybody passes a background check, you sell them a gun. So they brought in a psychologist that said this woman was twitchy, and you would have known she had some mental health issues if you spent any time in her proximity. So he kind of did himself in there. Basically, that was the last line of the law that I wanted to highlight for you, where if you know that a gun's going to be used in a crime, you get no protection. More or less, that's basically what happened to this gun shop owner. This law affords gun manufacturers a ton of protection. Let's talk about a couple ways that they've gotten around it, and then we'll talk about the main case that I think ultimately ends up at the Supreme Court and puts this whole thing at jeopardy. So a big key in this is, defects will not, you can't be protected from defects naturally. You can't put a bad product out there. And that's what got Remington. Like, Remington didn't have a rebuttal here. They tried to use it a little bit. So you had to send your Model 700 back to get the trigger swapped out for one of these X-Mark Pros. That's how Remington just didn't get sued to oblivion. They basically gave some concessions and were like, hey, we're going to do this. I think it was 7.5 million rifles that they had to agree to swap the trigger out on. At the end, at the time of this article, this CNBC article, which I will also link down in the description, I think only 22,000 people took advantage of this thing. So Remington made out pretty well in this one, all things considered. So this, when your gun taking friends come showing up to the party and say that this is bad and it just lets them get away with whatever and they can't be sued for whatever, that's not true. If you make a bad product, you get sued and you lose, and you got to make it right. So Remington's a proof of that. So don't let the left lead you astray on this one. It just protects gun manufacturers from bad people using their products in bad ways. Now, this law has been challenged several times, and it stands up most of the time. So a lot of times they're taking the approach of there's not enough safety features, or it doesn't have this, or that's an industry standard feature. So they're kind of attacking the way the style of the gun, the things that are included in it. But there's one that stands out, and it was against Springfield Armory. So I'll bring up this Reuters article where basically what happened in this case, the lawyers didn't go after safety features and all that kind of stuff. Now, the case was very similar to the Glock case. So no magazine in there. There was a round in the chamber, and the gun went off. Now, what the lawyers did in this one, instead of suing for safety features and lack of warnings and all that kind of stuff, they sued based on the 10th Amendment. And what they said was that this law oversteps states' ability to regulate their own laws and adjudicate how they see fit. So they said it's an overreach by the federal government, which makes it a violation of the 10th Amendment. Now, this was a 3-judge panel in Pennsylvania that ruled on the Springfield Armory case. The kid died in this one. It wasn't paralyzed, he actually died. And the justices in this case found for the plaintiff. So basically, let me read you the exact quote. So one of the judges in the case stated, and I quote, "How states choose to allocate lawmaking power between the branches of state government is a core prerogative of the states as sovereign entities." So they ruled the act unconstitutional based on that it violates the 10th Amendment. Now, the Brady campaign was involved in this. The Brady campaign was involved in the Glock case. They're going to challenge this. I'm sure Springfield Armory is going to push back on this, which will just run it up the chain. I see this one going to the Supreme Court. If it gets there, they're going to have to make a decision on it. Let's hope they make the right decision. This protects a lot of gun manufacturers. If they were to get rid of this, gun manufacturers would be gone in an instant. Litigation would flood in. Yeah, from states and the Brady campaign alone, I mean, we'll bankrupt these gun manufacturers. There's just no way. That'll be the way they get rid of it. This is why in April you saw Joe Biden come out and say he wanted to see a win on the Glock case, was the one he was referring to. Now, he didn't get his win, thankfully, But back in September, they got the win that they need, and it gives it the pathway to go to the Supreme Court. It's another reason why you see Uncle Joe wanting to stack the Supreme Court. He's trying really hard. He sees this coming. He sees where this is headed, and he understands the weight and the ramifications of this thing. I think just looking at the Glock bill, I mean the Glock lawsuit and the win for Glock is fine and it's great. But I don't think that's the bigger narrative here. I don't think that's the bigger thing. I think we need to keep an eye on this act and make sure that it's okay. It's been challenged a couple times. There's ways around it. You know, the Sandy Hook guys got around this by saying that the gun wasn't properly marketed, and they got a win there. Remington had to make some concessions. Now they had a manufacturing defect in their triggers, so not protected there, which is fine outside the scope, if you will. But this one here, where it got ruled unconstitutional, is far and away the largest and most concerning one of them all. Let's keep an eye on this. Let's make sure this goes okay. Glock was great. It definitely helps set a precedent, but it's not exactly the same as an unconstitutional bill. And now there's a precedent set for its constitutionality. So yay for Glock. Glad they won. Keep an eye on this. I think we'll see this resurface and come back around. I'll catch you guys in the next one.